Long story short, she threw me out of the house, called the police on me, threw all of my stuff. It petrifies me how good she is at pretending to be a nice person. No, I don't want her meeting them, and I don't regret that decision at all in any way. I've never once talked to Talia about my mother. If I was really uncomfortable, I would ask for permission to move, and usually I would get in trouble. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is episode 2 of Coffee with Courtney, and it is all about toxic relationships, and in specific kind of my toxic relationship that I have with my mother. It's gonna be a bit of a doozy, this one, so sit back, grab a coffee, grab a tea, grab a wine. Let's talk toxic relationships. I had a bunch of you guys ask questions over on Instagram. I popped up a question box on one of my stories, so if you are interested in being included in one of these videos by asking a question, head over to my Instagram and follow me over there. I don't even know where to start with this one. First of all, I'll just give a very brief rundown of the relationship that I had, or lack thereof now, that I have with my mother. Growing up, my mother was always horrible to me. She's just a terrible person to everyone, not just me, so it wasn't like, you know, I don't feel special. She's just a toxic person. She refuses to seek help, so there's nothing diagnosed. Everything is kind of just a guess at this point, but severe personality disorder is something that I've been researching and think maybe she does have, as well as Munchausen by proxy, which is where you hurt your children for sympathy of other people. She really enjoys sympathy, so I'm sure there's a word for it. She creates situations and you know, tells lies and spins stories to try and get sympathy from other people. My window's open and you can hear a bird chirping. Let me close it, because it's not a trappy situation. That did not help at all. You can still hear the bird, but that's fine. Yeah, she tells lies to everybody. She turns everybody against each other. She's very, very manipulative. If I had to pick one word that was her, it would be manipulative. The most manipulative person I've ever met. She deserves like a golden medal in manipulation. She was very physically and very emotionally abusive to me growing up as a child, and in my teenage years, and would just snap for no reason, for seemingly no reason. Just one example would be when I ate some ham out of the fridge at her house one day, and she just like lost her shit at me. Threw me in my room, you know, beat me, took my phone off me, cut the internet off so I couldn't speak to anyone from the outside world over eating a piece of ham because I was hungry. Like, I was probably like 15 or something like that at that point, but she was abusive my entire childhood. Another situation in which she's very manipulative, another story would be when I got a stomach bug one day and I vomited because I had a stomach bug. And then she went around telling everybody that I was being severely bullied in school and coming home vomiting from school because I was so severely bullied and just like sick to my stomach about it, which was untrue. I vomited one time because I had a stomach bug, and then she was just trying to get sympathy from other people because I was being bullied at school, which I wasn't. And then she showed up to the only person who I was friends with at that school. She showed up to her house. Mind you, I'm in primary school at this point. My mother showed up to her house and yelled at her and her parents. I don't even know what over. And then that friend never spoke to me again, and I ended up changing schools because of that. Keep in mind, I didn't find out that my mother did this until years later. It was only a couple of years, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, I found out that my mother had done that. When my friend that it happened to reached out to me, and you know, she found my videos and she reached out and, you know, wanted to chat, and I kind of just was like, what happened? Like, why did you all of a sudden stop speaking to me? And she told me what happened, that she showed up to her house yelling at her and her parents, and I was like, oh my god, I had no idea. It makes so much sense now why, you know, you stopped speaking to me. I'd be scared too if I was a child and my friend's mother showed up to my house unannounced, uninvited, just to yell at me and my parents for like no reason and just fly off the handle for no reason. That's just one example of her being very manipulative and turning people against each other. They're just two examples of, you know, my childhood growing up and just some manipulation that she's thrown into the works Just 2 examples. It happens every day with her. It's a new drama with her. She likes to stir the pot and create drama. Very toxic environment. Ironically, as I'm recording this, she messaged me a few days ago for the first time in like years. It's ironic timing. The last time I saw her, I showed up to her house unannounced and uninvited to pick up some of my baby items. I'd been asking for some of my baby items for a long time. It's before either of my girls were born, and I knew I was going to have kids eventually, and I wanted to have my baby items, like my dance costumes and things like that, to give to my kids as they grow up. And I asked for them, and she refused and said, no, they're mine, they're not yours. Financially not even correct either. My father paid for them, so technically if you were thinking from a financial standpoint, they were actually his. I wanted these items, they had sentimental value to me. I showed up to her house because she had been refusing to give them to me over text message. Not in a nasty way, I just knocked on her door and asked politely for my baby things. Long story short, she ended up inviting me inside of the house, yelling at me, and then I tried to find my items, and long story short, she threw me out of the house, called the police on me, threw all of my stuff at me after taking all of the items out of the box that I personally wanted. And she knew that those were the items that I wanted because I'd messaged her about them. She took them out of the box, threw the box at me, it smashed on the ground. All of my baby items, other than the things that I wanted, were just everywhere all over the floor. Some sentimental ceramic plates that were from my father's side of the family smashed on the floor. And she just screamed at me, ran inside and like bashed on her front door while I tried to pick up all my stuff off the floor. And she called the police. That's just one example of, she just loves drama. And it got to the point where I think she tries to make the people around her feel crazy, like it's her, like it's your fault. And I just couldn't handle it anymore. It was too toxic and I cut her off. That was the last time that I saw her. I kept a relationship with her for a very long time for specific reasons, but I'll jump into some questions that you guys asked me and hopefully I can answer some of your questions about it. The first question is, what boundaries did you apply to help yourself, or did you cut contact completely? My boundaries were very lax because I was very well aware that she has a mental illness. It's hard to say. Mental illness is such like I knew she had a mental illness, so I knew that it wasn't her fault in a way. So I did keep the relationship, or what little relationship we had, going for a long time. Even after she threw all of my items at me and threw me out of her house and called the police, I still kept a little bit of contact in the way of we would message. I didn't live in the same town as her, so I didn't have to see her. I just happened to be in town that weekend to try and get my baby things. Well, that wasn't why I was in town, but I happened to be in town that weekend when I tried to get my baby things. So if she would message me, I would respond, and that was it. I tried not to answer her phone calls because it always ended up in yelling and it was just really, really toxic. But I did respond to text messages. Now, when I completely cut contact and stopped speaking to her or answering her calls or even trying to have any form of relationship with her, was when I got pregnant with Talia, and I was 11 weeks pregnant, and I moved house without telling her, and it made her very angry. Like I said, I didn't live in the same town as her. She ended up getting her boyfriend to speak to me on the phone, and he threatened me in more ways than one. He threatened my dad, he threatened to do unspeakable, horrible things to me, and he threatened my dad as well. And up until that point, it had only been my safety that was on the line. Or, I don't know what the word is, but it was only my safety that I had to be concerned about up until the point that I got pregnant. And when I was, I hadn't told anyone I was pregnant yet because I was still very early in the pregnancy, so my mother had no idea that I was pregnant. But it was just a wake-up call that, no, I can't subject my children or my child to this situation, this toxic situation, being threatened, having their life threatened. I couldn't do it anymore, and that's when I cut off completely, because regardless of whether it was a mental illness or not, my child's safety was more important than me having a toxic relationship with my mother. So at that point, I was probably 10 or 11 weeks pregnant. I cut ties completely and didn't speak to her anymore. I did tell her that he had threatened me, and she did not believe me. She called me crazy and said I was making up stories, and it was just all the same BS from her. So I just cut ties completely for the safety of my daughter. That answers that question, hopefully. When did you come out of the fog and what happened? Example, when you came to the realization that she was toxic. So I just told that story. It was like, there wasn't so much of a fog. I was always aware that she was very toxic and very manipulative and not a nice person, because she had been my whole life. And my father is very level-headed. I'm very lucky to have him. He has his head screwed on and his feet planted, on the ground. So I could always go to him and tell him how I felt, and he was aware of the situation. He knew how it was, and he was always there to save me. So I had realized I grew up knowing that the way she wasn't normal. If she had been my only parent, who knows how I would have turned out, and I wouldn't have known that that wasn't normal. But because my dad is a very level-headed person, I had him to, there was no fog. I was very aware the whole time that she was toxic. Do others try to pressure you into seeing and building a relationship again with your mother? People that know her, 100% never, not once. Anyone that knows her knows exactly what she's like and would never try and make me have a relationship with her, because she is a horrible person. The thing is, she doesn't, unless you truly get to know her, at a face value, she's nice. So it's really scary when you tell, like as a kid, I would tell my friends, this is what my mother like, she's so horrible, it's blah, 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 blah. And I'd confide in my friends, and then they'd meet her to her face and she'd be like, hi, darling, would you like some cookies? She's like the nicest person in the world. And my friends would be like, what are you talking about? She's lovely. So it's really, really scary. You can't, unless you know her, you don't know. So anyone that's maybe met her and doesn't know her would be like, why don't you have a relationship with her, blah, blah, blah. But anyone who knows her, like any of my family members or any of her family members, no. No one tries to pressure me into having a relationship with her, because she's toxic and actually dangerous to have my kids around. So yes, if people don't know her, and no if they don't, if that makes sense. What was your childhood like growing up? What made the relationship toxic? I think I've explained what makes the relationship toxic is just like her mental illness. She refused to seek help. At the end of it, I did say to her, after some incidents at my wedding, I said to her, if you don't seek help and try and figure out what's wrong with you, go to the doctor, speak to someone about it, I'm not going to have a relationship with you. I actually said that to her for the first time after my wedding, after she made a huge scene at my wedding, my first wedding. And she said, no, I'm not crazy. You're all the crazy ones. Everyone tells me I'm crazy, but I'm not. It's you, blah, 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 blah. My childhood, though, was fine. I feel like I was very lucky to have my dad, and he had majority custody of me. I only went to my mother's house every other weekend, and then it just kind of stopped completely. It stopped completely when I was like a teenager, maybe like 15 or 16. So it was fine. I had a good childhood. I was very lucky to have my dad. If I didn't have my dad, it would be a completely different story. If I saw my mother more than I did, which was every other weekend since I was maybe like 3 or 4, my dad had custody of me, which was unheard of back in those days. My childhood would have been very different, but because I only had to see her every other weekend, it wasn't so bad. What are the main things your mother did that made the relationship toxic? I feel like it wasn't main things, it was just like all of these things that I've spoken about would happen every week. I would literally, I could write a friggin' book about it. I could go on for ages. It would take hours and hours and hours to go through everything that woman has done to me and the people around her. But I feel like I've explained enough that you can kind of understand where I'm coming from and how she was a toxic person. Would you tell someone that their relationship is toxic when they have 2 little kids, a house, etc.? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Do you mean like an intimate relationship? If I was a friend with someone and I could see that they were in a toxic relationship, 100% I would say something, regardless of, maybe even especially if they have kids. I am that type of friend though. I'm very open and honest and abrupt, and I tell it how it is. Not a lot of people can handle it, which is why I don't have a huge amount of friends, but the ones I do are really good friends and they get me. I would absolutely. It's not a good environment for children to be in a toxic relationship. Yeah, I would just be open and honest, but at the same time be aware that you're probably going to be met with some backlash and some pushback from that person just go into it aware of that. Do you ever wish you had a better relationship with your mother, that she could meet your girls? If she wasn't the way she was, absolutely. I would love to have a relationship with my mother. But the way she is and how she treats other people and the environment, the toxic environment she creates just by being around her, absolutely not. Never would I ever want to put myself or my children through that situation, ever. Which is why she has not met my girls, and she never will until my girls are old enough to understand. And if they ask questions themselves, like if they tell me they want to meet her, I'm not going to stop them from doing so, because that's their decision to make. But I'm going to make damn well sure that they're old enough and they understand and they know the exact situation. It's hard on this situation because I don't want to badmouth her and come across as just me badmouthing her. I just want them to be educated and understand what's going on. I want them to speak to multiple family members that know her so they can get different points of view and not just hear it from me and not just think that I'm badmouthing her, because it petrifies me how good she is at pretending to be a nice person. So I don't want to badmouth her and come across as this person that's being like, she's a horrible person, this is how she was, blah, blah, blah. And then they go meet her when she's older and they go, she's lovely, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? Like, I don't want it to just come from me. They need to talk to multiple different people, hear their sides of the story, hear my side of the story, hear my stepsister's side of the story, hear my dad's side of the story, hear my auntie's side of the story, hear anyone they want to. They can go speak to multiple people so they can make an informed decision as to whether they want her in their life when they're old enough. But while my kids are young and I am in control of it's my responsibility to keep them safe, no, I don't want her meeting them, and I don't regret that decision at all in any way. How can you stop feeling guilty and cut off a toxic person completely? The guilt honestly killed me for the longest time because I know that it's a mental illness. That's what made it really, really hard, is that I was like, she can't even control how she's acting, and this is just speculation. Maybe she can control it, I don't know, but I was pretty sure that it was a mental illness and she can't control it. So the guilt was really, really hard. Even when she called the police on me that day and threw me out of her house and threw all of my baby stuff at me, honestly, honest to God, all I felt was sadness for her. I didn't feel like scared or, oh my God, woe is me. I just felt so, so incredibly bad for her, because it got to the point where, I just felt bad for her. I don't even know how to explain it. Getting over the guilt was like, she did that to me before I had kids. And the fact that her partner threatened me and my father while I was pregnant, there was no guilt after that. The fact that I told her and she didn't believe me and she told me, no, I'm crazy, there was no guilt. I was like, no, if you're not going to believe what I say and try and protect your own daughter, I'm not going to trust you to be in my life nor my children's life. There was no guilt after that. The horrible, despicable things that man threatened me with was just no. I'm sure every toxic relationship isn't the same, in where there's one big thing that stands out that just makes you go, no, that's not okay, and the guilt stopped from there. And it would be really hard if you didn't have that one specific scenario that made you not feel guilty. I couldn't imagine still feeling guilty about not having a relationship or trying to have a relationship, or her meeting my kids or whatever. I don't feel bad because of that one thing that happened. So I don't know. That's how I stopped feeling guilty, is that happened. Do you ever get, but she's your mum, you can't cut her out, won't you regret it one day? Like I said, not from the people that know her. Everyone that knows her is absolutely like, honestly, tells me that I've made the right decision and don't have the kids around her. She's dangerous, she's manipulative, she's toxic, she's horrible. So I don't really get that from anyone that knows her, but anyone that doesn't know her or understand, I do. Like I said, I do get that occasional person that'd be like, oh, don't you want her to have a relationship with your kids? And it is a little bit frustrating, but at the same time, I don't have the emotional capacity or energy to explain how she is as a person and treated me as a child. I don't have that to be explaining it to everyone. So you just have to be confident in your own decision and know that you've made the right choice for you and for your children and the people around you by cutting them out. and not let those comments get to you, because they don't get to me, because I know exactly what she's like. How has the relationship affected how you are as a mum? It's definitely made me more mindful of how I talk to my kids and how I discipline them. I really struggle with discipline. I struggle with discipline because of how she treated me and how she disciplined me growing up. For example, eating a piece of ham and beating the crap out of me. And I just can't, I'm just not good at discipline, because the line is very blurry to me as what is acceptable behavior. So I'm not good at discipline. I really don't do it as much as I should. I try to implement things like going to your room and getting down to her level and talking to her and things like that. But having grown up with different discipline from both of my parents, I don't know what to do with discipline. I really struggle. Luke helps me a lot with discipline with Talia. My dad smacked me as a kid, which is fine. I have no issue with that. And honestly, I thought as a kid growing up, I thought that that's how I was going to discipline my kids, because I was never scared of my dad. I didn't fear him. I respected him. I knew where my boundaries were. I knew when I was being naughty. He would send me to my room. He would smack me. No issues with it whatsoever. Like, I know everyone's completely different, and I totally get why people don't smack their kids. I'm one of those people that don't smack their kids because of how my mother was. So the line is very blurry to me, and I stay away from the line. That's how it affects my parenting. I don't discipline my kids. It's really bad. I'm learning. I'm getting there, guys. How old were you when you stopped having a relationship with your mother? So, when I stopped completely all contact, I was probably 25. Was I 25 when Talia was born? Oh, yeah, I think I was 25, 24 or 25 when I stopped having a relationship with her altogether. I've only spoken to her on the phone one time since that happened, and it was a complete accident. She rang me from an unknown number and I picked up, which I don't usually answer unknown numbers, but for some reason that day I did. It's always her, which is why I don't answer unknown numbers. That was how old I was when I stopped having a relationship with her altogether. How did you manage to cut ties with your mum? You don't have to answer if not comfortable. Yeah, I think I've explained that. It was just a fear of my children's lives, as opposed to just me fearing for my own safety. It was my kids, and that was an easy decision to cut her out. Do you talk to Talia about her granny? And if yes, do you tell her? Oh, what do you tell her? No, I've never once talked to Talia about my mother. Never. She's never heard me talk about her. She doesn't know her name. She doesn't know, like, is she granny? Is she nanny? Who knows? No one knows. They don't have a relationship. As for growing up, when she's a bit older, if she asks me questions, I'll answer to the best of my ability without, I don't know. I'm just going to try and answer as honestly as I can as she grows up when she asks questions. And if she has questions that I'm not comfortable with answering, I'm going to be getting her to speak to my family members. I know that sounds horrible, but I don't want to come across as the woman that's bad-mouthing a person she doesn't know. I want her to speak to multiple people, like I said before. So I don't speak to her about my mother. I don't plan on doing so unless she asks questions, and I don't really see that happening anytime soon. I'll deal with that when it happens, when she's older. Do you think you'll ever have a good relationship with your mum? No, absolutely not. Never. At this point, even if she was to go get help, you can't believe the things she says. So I would find it really, really hard to trust her. She tells blatant lies and spins like crazy, crazy stories. So I just don't think that's ever gonna happen. If I didn't have kids, I probably would be more inclined to believe her if she came to me and said, I'm seeking help and I've been diagnosed and I'm medicated and blah, blah, blah. But just with how many lies she's told me and how horrible she's treated me and the things she's done, I'm not willing to risk my kids' lives like that. So I don't think so. What would trigger your mother to become the way she was? Was she a narcissist? I've spoken to my mother's mother about this, and from what she has said, she had a wonderful life growing up. Nothing crazy happened in her childhood that I know of that could have triggered her to be the way she was. I think it was just a mental illness. And I'm not sure whether a narcissist is the word to describe her. I don't know. There's lots of words to describe her, and honestly, I haven't spent much time thinking about it in the last few years because it's not worth my energy, it's not worth my time, it's not worth any space in my head. So I don't really think about it a whole lot. Was your mother nasty to you from a young age, or was it from when you reached your teenage years? Yeah, she was always nasty to me from what I can remember. I think things got more physical as I got older. I can't remember her being overly physically abusive to me as a child. I think maybe the physical abuse did start when I was a little bit older, maybe like 11 or 12 or something like that. It's all really foggy in my head. This is just what I remember. She was very, very emotionally manipulative towards me as a child, and then became emotionally and physically as I got older. Example of emotional manipulation would be she made me sleep in bed with her until I was like 10 or something like that, wouldn't let me sleep in my own room. And I wasn't allowed to move in bed, so I had to lay there and not move. And if I moved or rolled over or made a noise, she would just like lose it and yell at me. So I would just have to lay still and I basically was awake all night just laying there, because if I was really uncomfortable, I would ask for permission to move, and usually I would get in trouble. That's just an example of the emotional manipulation that she put me through as a kid. And then it just got a little bit more physical as I got older and started to bite back a little bit. I think that's what pissed her off, is when I started to question her and her authority and how she treated me. That's all the questions that I have from you guys. Honestly, I don't even feel like I've touched the tip of the iceberg in explaining the manipulation that this woman put just me personally through. She's put other people around her through so much more manipulation than she did with me, because I only had to see her every other weekend. My stepsisters, for example, they lived with her full time from when I was about 15, when I didn't see her anymore because she moved away. She moved away to go be with my stepsister's dad, and they lived with her full time. And I don't know how the fuck they are still alive and functioning parts of society after having been subject to living with that woman full time. I can't even fathom. She did much worse things to those girls and they had no escape. That's not my story to tell. I'm not going to give specific details, but they're really, really horrible. But not only that, but she also manipulates the adults around her. It's not just kids, it's literally just everyone. She refuses to believe she has a problem. It's a safety concern, honestly. It's a safety concern, and I do not know how I would feel if I was to run into her on the street when I have my kids around. I don't know what would happen. I'm not sure whether she would come up and speak to me. I don't know what I would do. It would be really scary for me because I've worked really hard to keep my kids away from her. The text message that I spoke about earlier that she sent me the other day randomly for the first time in years it's hard, because if I was to show you the text message, you would think she's the nicest person in the world, and I just know that's not the case. So I don't talk to a lot of people about it, because if I was to be like, can you look at this message that my mother sent me, they would be like, oh, that's so lovely of her. But I know that there's always ulterior motives. There's always a reason behind everything nice that she does. And the text message told me that she is going to be dropping off all of my baby items that years and years ago I did try and get back from her. She said she's going to drop them off to my brother's house and I can pick them up from there whenever I'm ready. It's what I wanted at the end of the day. That's what I asked for years and years ago when she threw me out of her house and called the police on me. That's what I asked for, but I don't even know if I want them now. It feels dirty to me. I know that sounds stupid, but I don't know. I will probably eventually go get them and go through it and have a look at what there is, but at the same time, has she put tracking devices in them? I don't know. This is literally what I'm think about. I don't know. Maybe I'll go through it at his house and pick and choose what I want and make sure that everything is safe. That was the text message to let me know that she's giving me back my baby items that I asked for years and years ago. I felt bad for her that day that she threw me out, because I tried to see from her side of things, and I could see we didn't have a good relationship, and maybe that was just the last thing she was holding on to maybe have a good relationship with me. And I felt really sad thinking about that, because at that point I wasn't pregnant. I hadn't been threatened, and I did have that guilt still. But more than likely it was probably just she was holding on to it to manipulate me in the future and try and get something out of me. And I said to myself at that point, when she refused to give it back to me, I will not let her use these items against me. If she tries to blackmail me or manipulate me in any way by using these items to get me to do what she wants, will not have it, not interested, those items are dead to me. That's how I felt in that moment, and that's what I came to understand and realize. And I spoke to my dad about it and he totally agreed. They're not worth it. The items aren't worth it to risk my children's lives or my life. But now that she's just handing them over without asking, seemingly without asking for anything, I'm not sure how to feel about that. I don't know how I feel about that. Anyway, this has been the longest video, and I don't even know if anyone is still watching at this point. If you are still watching, leave a chicken emoji down below. Random happy emoji that has nothing to do with today's coffee with Courtney. My coffee is cold now at this point, but I'm used to that because I'm a mother. Thank you so much for watching episode 2 of Coffee with Courtney. I hope you liked it. I hope it wasn't too jumbled. I feel like I just word vomited on you guys because I don't know how to structure this specific topic because it's so blurry to me. I hope it made sense. I hope it helped you in some way. Not much was spoken about other toxic relationships, like intimate relationships and things like that. Mostly just from a mother-daughter standpoint, but you can apply any of these things to any toxic relationship. I just happen to have a toxic relationship with my mother. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Let me know in the comments if you're loving this series, because I know I'm enjoying recording them. Give it a thumbs up and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!